my messaging on that. So without further ado, I will turn to our final speaker. Tariq Ali will be known to all of you, I think, for his writings, his broadcastings, and above all, his political role over the last decades, particularly as an anti-war campaigner and activist. So please welcome Tariq Ali.
Friends, very happy to be here. A great deal has been said by all the speakers from the platform, so I don't intend, or at least I will try not to repeat what they've said, because I agree with it, and I think we all do. I think the point made by Kate just now is a very important one, that this is the first time for years that we have an opportunity to really win this battle on the Trident issue and have nuclear weapons removed from UK soil forever. It's a long fight. It's been going on for decades. I remember when I first came to this country as a student, CND was in full flow, and CND was an organization with hundreds of thousands of members and supporters all over the land. Over 100 Labour MPs were members of CND. And the importance of CND was this, that it prevented Britain at that point in time from becoming a state of the sort that West Germany was, that other Cold War states was, and the United States was at the time too, states where there was no dissent on these issues at all. And the campaign for nuclear disarmament in this country inspired the rise of many, many similar, though not on the same scale, movements. And the campaigning was so effective that CND won over the entire Labour Party for a year. And then the right fought. And then the right fought to win it back again, and they wouldn't have won it back had an Iron Bevan not capitulated. That's what happened. And said, as I remember his famous speech, which was people were discussing when I first came, Britain cannot go naked into the conference chamber. That was the famous phrase. We would be disarming ourselves, but you know, this was all part of an illusion, which many people at that time wanted to believe in. And that illusion was that Britain had some independent role to play as a major power on the world stage. And by 1956, it was already over. Because after the Suez adventure, when they invaded Egypt, after Egypt had nationalized the Suez Canal, the United States made it very clear that these adventures would not be permitted. And if you look at the reports of that period, effectively, the American President Eisenhower rang up Eden, the British Prime Minister who had taken Britain into this debacle, and said, according to the reports, used barrack room language to make it clear who was in charge of global policy. So this notion somehow, either with the nuclear weapons of old or with their 1962 replacement Polaris, that somehow this was going to enable Britain to play a role on its own was nonsense. That's when the process began in 1956, taking any independence away, or any illusions that Britain was still an empire. Though some colonies, of course, still existed, it was the United States that was in charge. And today, if you look at it, I mean, quite honestly, I don't think any serious person doubts that Britain is effectively a vassal state.
Yeah, it is.
But the United States makes the decision that there is absolutely nothing that the British Ministry of Defense can do without the permission of the Pentagon, that the armies, the intelligence services, the military intelligence services of these two countries are interlinked, as is the surveillance and the intelligence gathering by the NSA in the United States and GCHQ at Cheltenham. Interlinked, exchange of everything, information, exchange of names of people who have to be picked up. So the notion, I mean, I know Jeremy used the phrase because it had been used in past times or was forced to reply to it, but in reality there is no English finger on the nuclear trigger. The only finger is an American one. And that is the Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, which is the US General commanding NATO. Without their permission, no nuclear weapons can be used by any NATO member. That's the fact. So what is this farce about? It's pretense. It's make-believe. And deep down, they all know it. Richard Norton Taylor quoted from Blair's appalling memoirs, which he must have, which I think Richard must have picked up in the crime novel section. Second hand, remainder. And Blair on this was very clear. There's no reason to have it. Its costs are appalling, and it is of no utility, he wrote. No practical value at all. It just upgrades us as a nation. Well, what is this upgrade? Let's just think about it. Upgraded as a nation by what? By Tony Blair telling the British ambassador, the new British ambassador to Washington, who goes to Downing Street and is asked, what is my primary task? What is my priority? And the Prime Minister and his advisors tell him, your primary responsibility is to stay in the posterior of the White House and just listen. That's where we want you. You have to be there, making sure that we're, behind them in every sense of the word, and offering support. And that's what the ambassador said publicly in his memoirs. This is what the Prime Minister of this country told me. He was angry. But that was the line. That was the line when they went to the war in Iraq. And while on that subject, it is worth remembering that Jeff Horn, does anyone still remember him? Yeah. I'm sorry to mention him and bring him up again, who was British Defence Minister, said we need Trident and we need nuclear missiles because if the Iraqis use weapons of mass destruction against us, we shall be compelled to use our nuclear missiles. Who actually said that? So the last politician to threaten the use in a concrete situation was Jeff Hoon, the new Labour Defence Minister. And of course he was lying through his teeth because they all knew in the United States and here that there were no weapons of mass destruction left. The inspectors had told them that, they knew that themselves from their own sources, but this pretense went on. I mean, it was astonishing to see Donald Trump, the right-wing candidate in the US elections, actually saying it and saying Bush lied before the people and something should be done. He didn't say he should be tried, but the message was inherent in what he said. He said they lied, there were no weapons, and they knew it. Something which many members of Parliament in Britain to this day will not admit. So what is the problem? Then we're getting rid of these weapons. It is, as Blair said, they feel that they're slightly on a different notch from the Germans. We're above the Germans. because we've got nuclear weapons and they don't. Well, you know, for many of us, you're below the Germans, actually. Because having nuclear weapons is a disgrace in this day and age, and especially for a country the size of Britain. A relatively small northern European country pretending that it is what it isn't, and therefore hanging on to nuclear weapons at a time when every speaker here has emphasized that this 180 billion which they will end up costing is badly needed in virtually every other sphere of activity in this country, social sphere in this country, health, education, etc. Opinion polls here vary, by the way. It's not that a majority is always in favor of them. It depends often on how the questions are put. And when the questions are put bluntly, then people say, no, we don't want them. So it's not going to be a huge struggle. I mean, you know, we have to do it. But I think people can be won over on this. And why this issue has become important again, it always was for some of us, but now why it's become a national issue, because it's being used as a whip to punish the newly elected Labour of the Labour Party. Anything they can use to discredit him, to demoralize him, to drive him out, if possible. They virtually said that. Mandelson said, we can't kick him out immediately since he's just been elected, but we have to build up public opinion so that he leaves. Well, he's not going to leave of his own accord, whatever else he does. He's not going to do that. You'll have to vote him out off the Labour Party leadership. He'll stand again, probably be very likely he'll be re-elected again, and then what? You know, so it goes on and on and on, this campaign against him. And this whole new offensive on Trident is partially linked to that. Because Corbyn all his life has been a supporter of C&D, anti-Trident, anti-war, etc., etc. So how should we diminish him? How should we show he's a threat to our security? You wheel generals on, breakfast time, programs on Sunday to say we don't trust him. Well, for me, a politician that the military doesn't trust is a very good thing. I mean, think about it like that. They've trusted every single politician because he or she has done their bidding. I mean, it's wonderful to have a mainstream politician leading an opposition party who they don't trust. It's very positive. And let's hope that he uses his standing to take this debate further. And you know, it's important, and we have to say it, that politicians on his side too, as Lindsay was saying, don't say stupid things. I read somewhere that someone was suggesting today, okay, well, let's not have these nuclear warheads on missiles inside submarines. Let's put them on an aeroplane fleet and our bomber fleet that we already have. I mean, it's going from something that is bad to something that is much worse. They should just be very clear about it. I think the argument can be won because there is no rational argument in defense of these missiles on anything. Moral, ethical, political, economic, nothing. There is no need for them. For the simple fact is, and we have to say this, if Britain were ever threatened, because I can't think of who would ever threaten this country with a nuclear attack or anything like that, but if there's the United States to protect you. I mean, you know, you've given up your whole existence, your independence for that. There's NATO with its armed fleet. They will protect you. So what's your problem? Why do you need your own little weapon, your own little toy? And I think one of the important things, this big anti-Trident demonstration which is being organized, I think is politically extremely important. It's important because A, the only way we can push these things through is through mass movements. And by this, I don't just mean campaigns against the war or campaigns against Trident, but by putting pressure, that is, arguing with members of parliament, their constituencies, people who are important in all these different cities, which, as our friend from the Green Party said, has to be done in a united way, and put real pressure on them to answer questions on Trident. We did it to a certain extent on the Syrian bombing, and it worked. And for a week the press was going on about bullying, absolute rubbish. I mean, when they are lobbied by arms manufacturers non-stop, that's not bullying, because many of them in these parliamentary parties are looking forward to getting jobs there when they retire. But they're lobbied all the time by the defense industries, by pharmaceuticals, you name it. It is becoming very much like the United States here. It's not talked about. And so keeping the pressure up on members of parliament, and many members of parliament are not sure. They're divided themselves, they don't know. So the, political argument, mass pressure works. Because in fact, without the mass movement that took place in this country, Corbyn himself would not have been elected leader of the Labour Party. And that's a good way to explain it to many Labour people especially, that we need mass movements in this country to get you people on side. And then there will be a vote in Parliament, which the Tories are pushing through. And they hope, yet again, that maybe this vote will go against Corbyn. The Syrian one didn't. And this is how we'll help our friends inside the Labour Party, led by Hilary Benn and the Eagle sisters and various other jokers, to finally get rid of Benn. I mean, I don't think it's going to work, actually. I think there probably are enough, probably quite a strong majority of Labour MPs who will not accept to vote, who will not vote for Trident, and there might be a few Tories too, because if you read some Tory columnists, they are attacking Trident, saying it's no good. So we have to use the demonstration as a launch pad for different localities in the big cities, but throughout the country. One thing we know is that the cohort of Scottish MPs who are in Parliament representing the SNP will vote en bloc against any renewal of Trident. We know that. And add their votes to Labour votes, and unless Cameron introduces a three-line whip, it's not impossible you might get 2 or 3 Tory MPs as well. And there, there's a big, big battle to be fought and hopefully won. And the issue can be raised again and again to challenge this, because the renewal isn't due till 2020. So it's yet another battle we have to fight, because this one is linked to many, many other things in this country. It's linked to education and it's linked to health, because it's not a superficial argument to say that these billions being spent on these useless missiles could actually be used to benefit large numbers of people in this country who are not sending their children to universities because they can't afford to, who are worried about what's happening on education, who are even more worried about the creation of a 2-tier health service which has been proceeding slowly under Labour and Conservatives, and are worried that this might come to an end. So the fight to get rid of these missiles is really part of the struggle to improve the social fabric of this country, which has been seriously damaged. Thanks.
much indeed, Tariq. Now, before you all start rushing